Today we're going to talk about the four idols of Francis Bacon that were placed in a book from John Dewey in 1910 that was called How We Think. It is important to mention that every human possesses a different way of thinking, and we identify, according to Francis Bacon, four different kind of errors that we face whenever we have a problem or any situation that can become complicated and how we react. It is important to say that these idols from Francis Bacon are false patterns, those patterns that can be also phantoms that unconsciously we move through them depending on the circumstances. So, we're going to talk about these four idols with a very strong conclusion to understand why it is important to identify them in order to succeed in the process of our thinking. We must know that sometimes we do it correctly because we have a reflexive thinking, but it depends on how we get knowledge, important information in our brain that can be in, depending on how we educate our brain. These are the four idols. The first one is the tribe, second, the cave, the third, the marketplace, and the theater. The tribe is the natural human tendency to see patterns, seek confirmation of our beliefs, and rely too much on emotions rather than logic. That is, that many times we just block from the rest of our world and we do not understand, we do not become reasonable to analyze a situation, and we just make those errors of blocking ourselves, not communicating with the world outside because we have very strong patterns, very strong beliefs that do not let us become logical to any situation. We're going to come with more examples later. The cave is the biases shaped by our personal experiences, culture, education, and environment that limit our perspective. It is how we understand the things that are close to our life because of what we have lived through, the education that we get from our parents, from school, from the society, to act in a certain way. And we many times believe that it it is because of the way we think and the way we are educated is the way we react, and that's it. The marketplace is a confusion and miscommunication caused by vague, misleading, or improperly used language. Communication is really important. It depends on what we say to whom, and if we are listening, we are open minded to understand things or not. Sometimes it requires to search for knowledge that can help us comprehend better any message. Finally, the theater. It is the blind acceptance of traditional beliefs, ideologies, and philosophical doctrines without questioning them, as if because of the authority that forces us or obliges us to act in a certain way without thinking how we can become more autonomous in the decisions we take. Studying from the idols of the tribe, this is a very important definition. Errors inherent to human nature. It is natural that we make mistakes. They arise from our natural tendencies to perceive patterns where none exist, favor personal biases, and be influenced by emotions rather than objective reasoning. Humans often interpret the world through their senses, which can be deceptive, leading to incorrect conclusions. Here are some examples: pattern seeking behavior, seeing shapes in clouds or attributing meaning to coincidences, like the picture you see. Confirmation bias, preferring information that supports our beliefs with ignoring contradicting evidence. And the other one is anthropocentrism, assuming nature operates in a way that aligns with human logic and emotions. Here we think or just how we perceive things because of the way we we think. That's very, very individual, as it is marked. For example, if I speak English as my second language and I have had contact with the culture, it's easier for me to understand how language moves than, for example, my students who have different perception about learning a second language. There are different connections in the brain and different interpretations, and I need to see how I can convey my way of assuming things to see on the side of the student and become more mm, on the side of them, as putting them in the center of attention of what they really need. Then we have the idols of the cave. Individual experiences of bringing education environment on cave or perspective to interpret the world. Subjective biases cloud judgment and prevent objective thinking. Examples: personal bias, a scientific favoring data that supports the theory while ignoring contradictory evidence. Cultural bias, a person raised in a specific culture believing their traditions are superior to others. Or in the specialization bias, an expert in one field assuming their perspective is the only valid one. I believe here that when we become professors of a second language to people who speak Spanish in a level of university, I know that it's more complicated to find out how we can become not just ethical on our teaching, being prepared enough to comprehend better the students' world, because as well as I have this specific personal environment of developing my life, they do bring their own also. So we need different reflections in order to assume a better connection among students and professors. And that is that if I speak English to them, I need to do it with empathy. If they are just learning, my English gotta be slow with easy words to be comprehended, but not just my speaking, because the idol of the marketplace is referred to communication connections. The idols of the marketplace arise from the use of language in communication. Words can be misleading, vague, or used improperly, causing confusion and misinterpretation. This problem is especially significant in philosophy, science, and politics, where precise terminology is crucial. Here are some examples. Ambiguous language. For example, the word theory in science means a well supported explanation, but in everyday language, it means a guess. Another point is the issue of technical terms. Words like energy and quantum are misinterpreted outside scientific context. In personal persuasion, politicians using loaded language to influence public opinion rather than presenting facts. It is involving. Here, it is important to analyze how the Aristotelian rhetoric of communication has to be with credibility, which is ethos, and emotions, which is related to pathos and logos, that information which brings all the logical part. We need to be persuasive. For that, we need to necessarily be on the side of our audience, what they are expecting to get, and what I really mean with what I'm talking about. It is in my classes, I very often make mistakes of the language that I use. Therefore, since I want my students to understand, I need to use body language, help them using repetitions. I need to bring theories, different theories like the constructivism or the that one for students have information that is more significant, meaningful. The cognitive and other theories that go more for education and helping them understanding through repetition, through helping construct their brain in a way that English comes in an easier way. Teaching English is is also to see that it's difficult communicating things that necessarily require continuous progress in our teaching elements. Finally, the idols of the theater. The idols of the theater come from blindly accepting established beliefs, traditions, or dogmas without questioning them. These false ideas are often rooted in philosophy, religion, and outdated scientific theories that persist despite evidence against them. Bacon compared this to theatrical plays that present illusions instead of reality. Aristotelian physics for centuries, people accepted Aristotle's ideas about motion despite experimental evidence disproving them. In the religious dogma, rejecting scientific discoveries because they contradict traditional beliefs. And political ideologies, unquestioningly following a political system without considering alternative viewpoint. For these adults of the theater, we must see that knowledge is power. We tend to assume what the people in the power know everything, but they don't. It is we who are responsible to see that justice is applied, that our autonomy is also functioning, and finally, that it is important to be able to see the reality instead of illusions, finding the truth. We can conclude now that Francis Bacon's Four Idols highlight the different ways human thinking can be distorted by biases, experiences, language, and tradition. These errors prevent us from understanding the world objectively and slow down the progress of science and knowledge. I want to invite you to analyze these four idols or phantoms or false patterns that do not let us go through in life in a very important process. We are blocked because our mind is lazy in searching for knowledge. Go for reading, go for observing more the world so that your interpretations of everything become better and you can socialize easier, comprehend situations better and faster to decide for the best solutions. See you for the next time. Here is the bibliography where you can find this information and more. Hope your life becomes better from analyzing and checking that we tend to mislead things, but if we get closer to knowledge, these errors will go away.